Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure greeting you at our webinar. My name is Kate McNabb, and I will be the host of this event. The topic for today is creating sustainable value. With the slogan, we share, we learn, we transform. Now, let me introduce the schedule for today. Vesa Jokela from Business College Helsinki will start the webinar. After that, we have 3 speakers, and at 11:30 till 11:45, we have a 15-minute coffee break. During presentations, you can write your questions in the chat, and the most interesting ones will be made to our speakers at the end of each presentation. And now, Vesa Jokela is here with welcoming words and presentation of our Business College Helsinki. Hello, Vesa. Hello again. Seems like Vesa has some technical problems, so I would like to present now our first speaker, Lisa Kolehmainen. She is from Oatly Company, sustainability specialist. Hello, Lisa.
Hello. Hi, do you see me or hear me? Or both?
say yes, we can hear you.
Ah, great.
Yes, Lisa, we can hear you very good.
That's super, super great. I see that for some reason my fonts are a bit different than they're supposed to be. I just want to check with the organizer that you are sharing the PDF file. But let's not get stuck to there. I think you still understand the message, even though the fonts don't look as cool as they're supposed to. So I'm ready to start if that's okay with you. Good. So let's get to it. One slide back, please. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super honored to be here and excited to share my favorite topic with you. I'm Liisa Kolehmainen from Oatly, and I work as a sustainability specialist for Oatly Finland. A couple of words about the boring corporate side of things. So me being a sustainability specialist in Oatly Finland means that my work mostly focuses on sustainability engagement, meaning that seeing how through partnerships and projects here locally in Finland, we can increase our sustainability impact. And I'm in my dream job, and I'm super delighted to talk to you about it. I'm going to start with saying a couple of words about Oatly. Then I'm going to move forward to talking about sustainability a bit, me being a sustainability specialist. And then I move on to the main topic of the day, how companies can create change when using their voice. And I'm going to talk about it through the concept of corporate activism. So I am ready for my next slide, please. Can I see the next slide, please? Thanks, great. So we in Oatly are a company built on the idea of change. It can be, some of you don't know that Oatly was actually founded already in the 1980s in the Lund University in south of Sweden, where a group of oat geeks and researchers put their heads together to find an alternative for dairy. Already then they were said that the alternative has to be healthier, more resource-wise, so that you need less land, less field, less hectares to produce one liter of that new awesome drink. And also that if it would have the same functionalities, but a bit better health aspects to the drink, that would create a huge benefit to the whole society. That's what they started on working and succeeded quite well, at least in my opinion. And that's where the story of Oatly began. It was quite a small story for many years. Oatly was a product mostly sold in special stores for people with a lot of allergies, for example. And then in 2013, our current CEO, Toni Pettersson, joined the company and saw that this amazing product is actually good for everybody, not only those with allergies or problems. So they wanted to turn Oatly into a brand that fits everybody's lives, that's available everywhere, and that's what they started working on in 2013. And now we're here. Oatly is sold in about 20 countries, if I remember correctly, and from US to China to Germany and Finland. Can I have the next slide, please? We only do oats and we only do plant-based, but we've moved quite far from that one oat drink that they developed in the Lund University, and now we have products that fit kind of like all the situations when you're craving for dairy. So we have oat yogurts that are great for snacking or breakfasts. We have spreads, which are really good to have on your bagel or toast. We have a really wide cooking range. So pretty much if you want a creamy sauce, you can use our product. If you want like do a tzatziki or something like that, you can also use our, for example, a Turkish yogurt. And then my personal favorite, we have amazing ice creams, of which I love the strawberry one. We can move to the next slide, please. What we really set in stone is that the future has to be more plant-based, and that is something that we're working towards every day. Everyone who works in Oatly has some kind of like a role to play in that. And we think that the more there is extremely important. Of course, we're not aiming for a 100% vegan world. We don't think that that's actually even that sustainable or pragmatic. But we think that when selecting plant-based, people have the possibility every single day to do something to make their lifestyle a bit more healthy and above all, a bit more sustainable. And even though this message is sometimes seen as really strange or really radical even, it's actually quite a boring one, given that huge institutions like the UN or the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, most of health officials of different countries agree with the message that both for health and sustainability reasons, we have to move towards more plant-based diets. I'm a sustainability specialist, so I'm going to dive into the sustainability side of things a bit more in just a sec. But just a word about the health, which is, of course, equally important here. If you look at, for example, the average Finnish diet, and I think the situation is pretty much the same in most of the Nordic and European countries, that there's two big problems in our diet. We get too much animal fat, which are the hard fats, the bad fats that that in the long term can make you sick, and we get too little fibers. And those are both things that are easily fixed by moving towards more plant-based diet. And we want to see those baby steps. We want to see that people choose plant-based option once a week or decide to test for a month what would a oat drink taste in their coffee. And I think that that is a good way to create the change. But now let's dive into the sustainability side of things. Can I have one more slide, please? Thank you so much. So scientists and most reasonable people on Earth agree that we must keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. Why 1.5? It seems like such a random number, but climate change is such a phenomenon that actually even when the heating goes like this, the problems that it creates go like this. So we're seeing an ice hockey curve in things such as drought, heat waves, huge rains in different regions where they're not supposed to be. And in the social side, for example, climate refugees are due to increase so much if we go past that 1.5 degree limit. So how are we doing there? Actually, we are already at 1.25 degree. So the global average temperature is already 1.5 degree warmer than it was before industrial times. So we don't have that much time there to work towards stopping the climate change to 1.5. And we have, scientists say that we have about 10 years to cut the global climate emissions into half. And in Western countries like Finland, for example, it's actually even more that we need to do. Here in Finland, we have about 9 years to cut the global, the Finnish climate greenhouse gas emissions to with 60%, and that is a lot. And we at Oatly are a food producing company, so we see that our responsibility lies within the food system the most, which is not a small player in all of this. Often when you think about climate change, you think about flying, you might think about cars, you might think about maybe buying new clothes. Of course, these are all super important things. But actually food produces about 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So that is 1/4. And of this, and this is of course all food. And then if we look at animal-based products, that's about 14.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And that is a huge number, quite close to, for example, the global impact of all transport. We can move to the next slide, please. Thanks so much. I'm actually starting to like this cute 90s font that we have going on here. That's all global and can be a bit difficult to think about what is my role in all of that. Well, for an average person in Finland, I know that we might have some international listeners, and I do apologize that all the examples are so Finland focused, but I think here Finland can serve also as a good example of an average Western country. So here in Finland, an average footprint of an average person consists of things like traveling, heating your home, buying new stuff, and then food. And food is actually 1/5 of that whole climate footprint of an average Finn, which is a big number. And here we can take a closer look of what that 1/5 consists of. There we have different things that people enjoy throughout their days and what is the climate impact of that 1/5. So here we see that it looks quite dark. 37% is from meat, 36% is from dairy, and then there we have fish and eggs. So actually, if we put all of those together, the climate impact of animal-based products on an average Finn's diet is about a bit more than 75%, which is a huge number. Of course, this doesn't mean that if you cut out all animal-based products, your impact just magically decreases 75%, not at all, because you normally substitute that with something. But here in Finland, the research shows that actually for an average diet, the impact is about 40%. So the impact of going plant-based or eating even more plant-based can be really big. And that's what we're here to encourage people to do. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So we are not only talking about climate, of course, but the how we feed all the people in the planet is actually a huge part of that. We need to feed 10 million people by 2050, and we need some new solutions to that. We live in a water planet. About 70% of our planet is water. And then if we look at the land surface, there's things like glaciers, barren land, things that aren't not so nice to live in or to farm in. So we are left with 71% habitable land. And of that, already 50% is used on agriculture. And of that 50%, 77% globally is used on livestock, which is really big, given that it only gives the 33% of the global protein supply. So we see that when we have more people joining us on this awesome planet, we also have to make sure that we have food to feed all of them, and just increasing the amount of fields, for example, kind of isn't an option because we're already using 50% of all the land that we have available. So when we need to create more food, more protein, more carbs, we think that one amazing way of doing that is to increase the land area that we use for plant-based and decrease the ones that we use on livestock. Can I have the next slide, please? And of course, there we looked at land use, and this affects all mammals on Earth that we humans are a proud part of. Land use is the biggest driver for biodiversity loss, and of that, about 80% of the extinction threat to mammals and birds is due to agriculture. And actually, if we look at the animals that are left here on this planet, I think if we talk to children about animals, or if we look at natural documents, for example, we think about tigers, we think about deers, we think about whales. But actually, of all the animals and mammals that we have left, only 4% is wildlife. And about 40% is people, and then the left is actually livestock. This is measured in biomass. So we see that our food system has a huge impact on climate. It has a huge impact on land use, And above all, it has a huge impact on biodiversity, which is so exactly as big of a threat to us people as climate change. Then let's move on from those horror stories. Can I have the next slide? Thank you so much. What we and Oatly are here to do is to create a more sustainable world. And of course, a lot of what we do is that we focus on our own water use. We try to use as little water as possible, make sure that we circulate it in a good way in our production sites. We try to use as little energy and as clean energy as possible. We try to have as efficient supply chain as possible and work with the farmers so that they get a decent income from the sustainable oats that they're giving to us and or actually selling to us. But we think that good sustainability work isn't only that. It can't be limited to only your functions that you do inside your own operations. And we want to look outside. We want to see what is that bigger impact that we can create outside of our own operations to impact actually the whole society. Can I have the next slide? And we're doing that as a company that is boldly using their voice. We can take a bigger look at the bigger picture here. People have been talking about the changing role of companies for a really long time. Can I have the previous slide? The dark apple one. Thank you so much. So people have been talking about the changing role of companies in a society for a while. So that people are talking about how powerful companies are. We know that there are certain companies that are in a world where money means power are even maybe more powerful than big states or countries. And that is often portrayed in a bit kind of like a dystopic way that what is happening to democracy. Of course, that's a big threat that we have to be mindful of. And at the same time, I personally see that the power that companies have is actually a huge potential as well. Because if companies would decide that huge voice, that huge power, that huge budget for creating a more sustainable world, we would be so much closer to reaching those climate goals that we have as a humankind. And we are trying to do just that, use our voice to create a bigger change in the society, also outside of our own operations. Now I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So here you see one example of what that can look like. And this is something that globally people have started to talk about with the term corporate activism. Also, I'm going to borrow that word here. That a corporate or a company can be an activist demanding a better future and more sustainable world. Here's one example, one of my favorite things that we did in Germany. We launched a petition to actually make climate labeling a law. This means that this wouldn't affect only our products or only plant-based, but all foods. So that whenever you go to a supermarket, you take a loaf of bread, for example, you see how much protein they have, you see how much carbs they have, and then you'd see the climate impact of that product. And we just think that it's crazy that that isn't the situation now, that we have to demand it, because the climate and the health of the planet that we're living in affects our own health exactly as much as those things that we put inside our body as nutrients or other stuff. So that's what we decided to do. We launched a huge campaign in Germany, rallied some troops from other companies as well, and we had 30 days to collect 50 names, and that we succeeded in, which is amazing. And now this law is being handled in the Bundestag, which is the German parliament. And there's actually a chance that we can see a change in legislation. And I think this is a good point to kind of like stop and wonder how big the impact of that could be. And it could be huge, and it could be so much bigger than anything that we could reach by just focusing on our own production and getting that already really low climate footprint even lower. But to give people that opportunity to actually compare food stuff and to see what is the most climate friendly option and base their decisions also on that, we could see a huge decline in the impact of food, where we know that a lot of people would like to eat more sustainably, but just don't know how. And I think this is a really cool example and also really inspiring way that shows how companies actually can have a huge impact in the society around them when they just use their voice boldly. So what is this corporate activism all about? Let's move to the next slide. This is a new word that there isn't actually like a really set in stone definition of it. There isn't a textbook on corporate activism, or maybe there is, but I maybe just haven't read it. But there's many definitions to the word. It can mean joining a social debate, which we see a lot of companies doing when it comes to climate change, for example. Here in Finland, Finlation is a great example of a company just producing bed linen, all of a sudden being a really cool climate activist player as well. It can be taking responsibility outside of your own operations, which is something that I'd like to highlight, that this is something more to the day-to-day responsibility work that companies already do. I'd say that almost all of the companies have some focus on their own sustainability, and then some companies have just decided to take that next step and also use their voice and more concretely marketing budget for creating that more sustainable world. It can also be driving justice, that what we saw last summer a lot with the Black Lives Matter movement, how companies decided to highlight Black and brown voices, and how companies decided to join to show their support for the activists fighting for it. And I think it's also good to be honest about it, that it can also be brand building, and in worst case it can be greenwashing or pinkwashing when it comes to social questions, where companies just want to kind of like jump on the bandwagon of sustainability and make their brand seem a bit cooler than it actually is. We saw some results earlier this year from a thing called Sustainability Brand Index, a cool sustainability thing to check out for those interested, that showed that actually 29% of Finns don't trust in sustainability communications or responsibility communications. And I think that is quite alarming, and also saying that there it showed that about 42% of people say that they can judge themselves whether sustainability communications is credible or not. And I think it's up to us as companies to earn that trust, to make sure that sustainability communication and also corporate activism is actually based on hard facts and science and true acts of more sustainable work that the company does. And I also want to see consumers demanding that from companies. But how does the change actually happen? Sometimes it's really easy to see that, okay, we want to change legislation, for example. That is a really concrete thing, but sometimes using your voice doesn't have that concrete of a impact or change. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is how I see that that path to change playing out. So whenever a company uses their voice boldly, it's due to create new discussions. One amazing researcher that I used to work with always said that if transformation doesn't hurt a bit, then it's not actually a transformation. When you use your voice boldly for sustainability, there's doomed to be some people who don't agree. And I think that's where the discussions come. It can be on the social media, it can be in the opinion piece of a newspaper, and it can also be as concrete as a dinner table, where someone goes like, huh, did you see that new commercial from Oatly? That was annoying. Or did you see this campaign that Finlation is running, for example? And no matter where the discussion happens or where it begins, we think that there's an amazing way to create new thoughts and new ideas to the individuals joining that discussion. And even if it starts from a, let's say, bad place, I'd say eventually they end up to like, like maybe this climate is important that everybody's talking about. And that's where new thoughts and ideas come. And I think one of my favorite ideas is that actually thinking is a really, really important step on the way to doing. Sometimes it takes years of thinking about something. For example, me, I remember thinking for a couple of years about the impact that my food has on the environment and climate before I started to eat more vegetarian, and the same when decreasing my use of dairy. And this thinking that may be really slow and something that really no one sees can actually be a super important step towards the new habits. And that new habit can be testing a vegan lunch once a week. It can be going all vegan for a month. It can be changing the milk in your coffee to oat drink. And these new habits slowly build on when you can see that I can actually make this change happen in my life. And those new habits always lead to more discussions. And normally, if you do something really differently than you've done before, the people around you are prone to ask questions that, what is this? What's going on? What is this all about? Why did you decide to do that? Why do you carry that oat drink carton around? And then there's a new discussion again. And maybe those people there leave that discussion with new thoughts and ideas that can in years turn into new habits. And there we are in this loop. So I think that one really big impact that company can have when using their voice boldly is to create new discussions, new concepts, new thoughts, ideas that can slowly turn into habits. Can I have the next slide? So I think that my time is running out. So I want to leave you with two thoughts today. First of all, that companies can be so much more than not so evil. Traditionally, companies have focused on minimizing their negative effects on environment. They've been focusing on having minimizing the climate impact, minimizing the biodiversity impact, minimizing the water usage. And I'd like to see what happens when companies actually start to maximize the positive impact that they can have, maximize the social discussions that they join and start, maximize the movement towards a more sustainable world. And I think that's really promising of what kind of change can we see through there. Because of course, companies are not the only players solving climate problems or environmental problems. And I think the role of consumers has been highlighted too much. This crisis isn't going to be solved with only focusing on consuming a bit differently, but these are important players in also affecting policy and affecting our decision makers, showing the decision makers that companies and consumers want to do things differently and see that change. So I want to see companies also maximizing the positive impact that they can have. Next slide, please. And then I also want to see companies bringing back the act to corporate activism. I think it's also really fair to notice that a lot of traditional activists aren't fans of this new concept of corporate activism, because there is a lot of greenwashing, there is a lot of brand building, and also it can be that traditional activists think corporates as something that they've normally rallied against, not something that they've rallied with. And I think this is important criticism that we have to keep listening, and time will tell, is this a concept that is useful in the future? But I just now think that it's such a good umbrella for all the voice using that companies do forget. But I think here it's time to bring back the act into corporate activism. Right now, there's so much pressure in all of the companies to show consumers that we are actually sustainable because consumers are starting to demand it, that sometimes it's a bit hasty. Sometimes there isn't so much real intention behind it. And I think that really shows, and consumers are smart, and consumers can demand corporates for more. Ask for the facts, ask for the science, be critical, ask for what the companies actually have done, what are the actions that they've done or taken to solve these problems. Are they only, talk is cheap, so are they only talking? And I think that corporate should be ready to answer that demand. So that was all for me today. Can I have the next slide? Because there's a cute dog. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear your thoughts. These are all kind of just theories and hypotheses that I'm testing with you guys. So I'd love to hear also your critique if something doesn't make sense. I'm not a huge fan of talking alone to a computer, so I'd love to get questions or comments or feedback or critique from you guys. There's also my Twitter handle and email. So if something feels too personal to share here, or that you want to continue the discussion with me in more private channels in email, please feel free. So that was all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, so much for your precious presentation. It was very interesting. And we have here some questions already I see in the chat.
Great.
Yeah, so let me read them to you. The first one is, I definitely love your brand image on Instagram. It's very interesting and creative. Could you please share some ideas about how do you deliver sustainability concept to young generations based on your products? So how is it for young people?
Yeah, really good question. I have to say that I love Oatly's Instagram as well. The one that we had a couple of weeks ago for people to find new partners and love in the comment field was just amazing, I think. How to deliver that to young people? I think one thing that you have to recognize here is that, for example, mostly the Generation Z, so the one younger to millennials, is really critical, and I think that's really good. And I think that when talking about sustainability to younger generation, you really have to make sure that you have your facts straight, that you have the science behind it. That's a big part of what I do to kind of like collect that knowledge base for our creative department to use in our campaigns, in our channels. Also, what I see that works in Oatly Instagram and in Facebook and Twitter is that we have huge community management group and team that are so good at what they do in like building the discussion. We take pride in that. We try to answer every comment. Of course, that's not always possible, but we answer as many as possible. And we also comment. We also answer to the. There's a lot of love, but we also answer to the hate that we get, which also builds the community feel to the communication that can be at worst a bit one-sided. So I think those would be my two silver bullets there, to be prepared to continue the discussion and have talented people to do that, and also to build strongly on science and fact whenever communicating about sustainability. Were there any more questions? Okay, I see that the face that I have been seeing has turned into no signal, so I think that's also a sign for me to move on. Thank you so much for this. I loved talking to you guys. Don't be afraid to contact me later if needed to Twitter or email. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Oh, I see that you're back. Did you have any more questions for me, or should we move on?
Yes, at least one little question from Zineb. Does the oat milk have the same nutrition value as the normal milk?
A good question. Not exactly the same, and that was one of the goals ever since from the 80s when we started to develop it, to make it a bit better. Actually, there's where in traditional dairy there's a lot of hard fats, animal fats. Of course, you don't get any of that from plant-based products, so we've used rapeseed oil to bring some good fats into the mix. There's also a little less protein, a little more carbs. And then there's fibers, these like liquid fibers called metagglutines that are super, super healthy for you, for your stomach, and also lower cholesterol, which is really important here in Finland, where a lot of people have cholesterol problems. So no, not exactly the same, but a bit better. Okay, sorry, that was weird.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you, Lisa, very much for your answers for the questions and for your precious presentation. We have some more questions, but I think we will leave the answers in the chat. If something, we will contact you, or as you said, some people, they can contact you directly to ask questions.
Yeah.
To learn and to share.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. Yes, see you next time. Goodbye. And now we have Vesa Jokela here, live from Pasila. So welcome, Vesa. Let me give you the chair and the mic.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as you can see, we are very creative in our college. We can solve many problems, absolutely technical problems at this time. So I wish you all very welcome today to join this seminar. And I hope that you will also enjoy the day and enjoy the presentations, what you will see. So what comes to me, I will shortly tell about my working environment, what kind of things I'm going to do here, and how they are related to today's themes. So my name is Vesa Jokela, and I'm a director closely related with the customer relations and partnership. So it means that my daily work is closely related with the companies. And I'm also the member of the management group. And I think it's time to show you some figure numbers and details about our college. So we are a private college, and here are the owners. The owners are the foundation of the Finnish Business College and the Helsinki Region Chamber of Commerce. So here are some figures and numbers. What the college is. So here is written the mission and also the vision and some key numbers about our college. So the mission is to offer our students the place where they can when they can grow their future professional skills. And our vision is to be the best learning partner for the future, with our students. So our turnover is about 15 million euros, and most of this money comes from the government, because we do the business, and also we have the students here, which covers approximately 3,200 students in a year. So here we have also some vocational qualifications, upper secondary qualification, further vocational qualification, and specialist vocational qualification. Continuing education center. What is our international activities, what we are doing with our students? We are offering our students to increase or expand their knowledge and experience of different cultures. In our college, we have approximately 35% of the students are coming from abroad. So we have different cultures in many ways. We also offer ability to work in a multicultural environment in Finland as well abroad. So here you can see also the language skills, what we are offering. So this was the end of my presentation, and I will also hope that you all will be very active and enjoy to be here in Pasila and to be participated about this seminar. So I hope that you will, I wish you and I hope that you will enjoy this day and be active. That is my only wish.
Thank you, Vesa, for your precious presentation. It was very interesting, and especially for us students to know and realize the success of the college that we're also a part of. And now I would like to present our next speaker, Sami Lundgren, Vice President, Responsibility from UPM Company. Hello, Sami.
Hello from here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Very good. So, extremely nice to be here, and first of all, congratulations for the organizers, because you actually have get extremely nice setup of speakers. I'm not speaking about myself, but Lisa was absolutely wonderful, and then Salla, even I will be listening to Salla's presentation afterwards, because Neste is really interesting case. But if I now go further, so thinking about myself and about the presentation, so this will be totally different compared to Lisa. So you actually could call me as a paper dinosaur compared to all these Instagrams and so on. And of course, when I go to the shop, I see Oatly every day. I actually use it. I almost love it, but not go for all the details. But at the same time, so UPM is totally different company. So when you go to the shop, you actually don't see our products in there. We are business to business. But at the end of the day, when you actually purchase your grocery and so on, most probably you get something from our side with you. Without going to details with myself, so long history at UPM, biologist and so on. But if some of you are interested about how people are working in UPM, what's my career and so on. So nice coincidence in this week's Kauppalehti. Unfortunately in Finnish, but there's a bit longish story about me and my career. But if you're interested about how one gets the responsibility vice president at a company called UPM, so please go ahead, take on Mondays Kauppalehti and enjoy. But let's take the next slide, please. Thank you. And this is now the boring kind of corporate part. Most probably the Finns online know about UPM, but for those who are not from Finland, we are most probably not familiar. Well, if you think about Finland, so what do we have in here? Well, nothing else than forest actually. Some lakes and so on, but mainly forests. So that's a kind of starting point from UPM. So our most common raw material is actually wood fiber or wood in all of its forms, and then the low carbon energy. Nowadays, UPM is, I could say, is a non-integrated company. So we have 6 different business areas: biorefining, including our forests in Finland, timber business, biofuels business, energy. That's self-evident, but when I said that we are non-integrated, it actually means that UPM Energy, most probably you haven't heard about that. It's one of the biggest energy companies in Finland, and actually we are selling energy to the market, to Nord Pool. And then our other businesses, they actually are purchasing their energy from the markets. This is something that we learned in a hard way, something like 15 years ago when we started the transformation. On that time, we were by far the biggest paper company in the world, when the paper consumption started to go down, well, we had the power units at the same site. If there wasn't nobody ordering paper, we actually went down with our pulp mills, we went down with our energy assets and so on. Now all of these are non-integrated, so even paper consumption is going down. There's something else that we are selling. UPM Raflatac doesn't tell too much for you. It's the second biggest labeling company in the world. If you go, for example, to Alko, might be that some of the students are going to buy, let's say, red wine. Most probably the label on the wine bottle might come from UPM. Specialty papers, all kinds of packaging materials, then communication papers. That is something that we are used to be only about communication papers, and we are still well known. It's still our biggest business, but shrinking every year. Then plywood, that's a very traditional wood business, and then we have something new. Thinking about UPM, we have 51 production plants in 12 countries, but we have 18,000 people in 46 countries. So yes, we are all around. The products you can see in here, packaging, labeling, transportation, electrification, and so on. Globally, we are having customers more than in 100 countries, roughly 13,000 customers, and Lisa mentioned that the companies are taking kind of wider responsibility. We actually have 21,000 suppliers in 70 different countries. So that's the kind of starting point if you think about corporate responsibility. And this is very kind of modest guesstimate, but we have more than 200 million end users globally. So even you can start from Finland, you actually can be a global company. Now when we go for the next slide, if we would be on the Pasila, and I would actually ask from you that what the heck does this responsibility mean, that when would it start? And this is a kind of short history lesson now. Usually I get answers that, well, at least Finns know that the forest industry, they have a bad reputation that the waters were spoiled in 1960s and 70s. Somebody might say that, yeah, it started 10 years ago when the people started to ask more about things. And then quite often I hear that, okay, now during the last couple of years, we are hearing about corporate activism. It's much more visible nowadays. But if thinking about UPM, so I'm coming from the small city called Kuusankoski, nowadays part of Kouvola, or even Kouvostoliitto as it's called. So the mill in there was established in 1872, so roughly 150 years ago. On that time, when the companies established those mills, they actually took care of the kindergartens, the schools, the doctors, lighting, everything about that at the site. And nobody thought about that. It was just the business as practice. All those social topics were taken care by companies because the society wasn't ripe for that. For example, in my hometown, Kuusankoski, so the group organized a vocational school in 1914, so more than 100 years ago. There wasn't society on that time who was organizing these schools and education. Companies were doing that by themselves. A while ago, when Finland celebrated the 100th centennial, we actually went through some of our history books and, for example, found a lady called Lili Vuorela. So she was working at one of our mills, and her title was Social Inspector in 1929. On that time, her task was to go to see the employees, how they are living, how they are making their food, what's how about the toilets, how about the availability of water, and that would be kind of unheard these days. Of course, my boss is not coming to my home checking that, Sami, are you cleaning and so on, but that was part of the company's activities on that time. After the Second World War, the paper collection was established in Finland, not because it's very green and environmentally sound thing to recover paper, but because we were lacking resources, because there was a kind of a material that you can use, and it was good business. and that was 8 years ago. 60s, 70s, 80s, yes, this water topic was heavily discussed in Finland at that time. There was a good reason, and actually the companies put things in order. And now if we go for the sustainability, the definition as such was established in 1987. It was the Gro Harlem Brundtland. She used to be the Prime Minister of Norway. And only on that time this kind of triple bottom-up or ESG, environmental social governance, that was established. But I dare to claim that companies have been doing these kind of things already beforehand, without actually knowing what they are doing. It has been part of the company DNA. 90s, Lisa mentioned biodiversity. That was discussed in Rio Earth Summit, the IPCC, climate change, that came on late 90s. And of course on UPM side, so for example, first eco-labeled products were launched at that time, the management systems at the mills, yes. And when this company in the current form, so UPM Kymmene Corporation was established in 1996, so the first environmental report was immediately published. And yes, we heard about biodiversity, that it's important topic. It absolutely is. And we established our first biodiversity program in 1998. So it has been on the agenda for many, many years. And here actually you can see one topic. This you heard it from Lisa that they actually are promoting a new law in Germany. And yes, companies are doing those kind of things nowadays. You see that we had a wood tracing system actually in Russia that was established in 95. And what happened afterwards is that EU came out with the wood tracing regulation called EU Timber Regulation, something like 7-8 years ago. We have US Lazy Act in the US, similar kind of topic. So actually, what is kind of responsible way of companies for operating at this moment will later on be part of the regulation. So this is actually how the things are working. Companies who are actually showing the way are somehow paving way for the regulation. It might take a while, but that's how it comes. Now, if we come from this decade, so for example, Lisa mentioned that it's very important that the companies are taking role. Yes, UN Global Compact was established in 2000. That's a business coalition below the United Nations. There's 13,000 companies in there at this moment. And companies really are important because, like we saw, they actually can be bigger than countries. Then if we think about what, for example, UPM did on 20 years ago, for example, if some of you have visited in Repovesi on these odd times, that's one of the nice national parks in southern part of Finland. That was actually donated by UPM to the state of Finland. What's interesting in here is what somehow strikes me that, for example, when the environmental management systems were taken into use in 1990s, the occupational health and safety systems were taken only use 10 years afterwards. So actually the environment was more important to manage than the people's health. What's important for us from that time was this Biofore strategy and 2020 targets. So already on that time we somehow came out that we need long-term targets and it has to be part of strategy. Now if we think about the latest topics, so nowadays we are speaking about human rights, we are speaking about taxes, Paris was important, climate change is very important topic as we heard earlier, ocean plastic at this moment, biodiversity and so on. And in our case, I could actually mention the beyond fossils, but let's come to that back later on. So this was a short history. My message here is that actually companies have been doing many of these things even without knowing what they are doing. It really makes business sense that you are not wasting materials. It's good for the environment, but actually it's also good for your results. But next, please. Thank you. So when the name of the webinar is the value, creating sustainable value, so this is actually what we are stating. And I'm reflecting for the fact that companies do have a big role and we need to create value for society. In UPM case, of course, it's the company, we are the big one in Finland, but at the end of the day, it's also our products that consumers, i.e. you, are using. And that has to be part of the strategy of the companies, how we actually are providing this value. And let's take the next one. Thanks. Next one. Thank you. And now if we think about that, well, why 10 companies are thinking that they have to be in a responsible business conduct at the companies. They have to have a kind of sustainable solutions what they are offering. This came already from Lisa. So growing middle class. There will be more people on this planet, whether we like it or not. It's forecasted that there will be 2 billion more consumers in Southeast Asia, so Indonesia, China, and so on. And I do have my fridge, and I can't actually say that they couldn't have their fridge. So just higher living standards actually are kind of pushing us to do things in a more responsible manner. And when people are consuming more, we are facing the resource scarcity, we are getting consequences like climate change. And of course, the digitalization, that's changing everything. Your generation is actually thinking topics much more differently than my generation. The behavior is changing. The investors are a big movement in this one. And it's just a fact of life that, for example, the regulation is changing. So if companies want to survive, they somehow need to be in front of that. And in our case, for example, if there will be 10 billion people using materials, so those should be renewable, those should be recyclable. If they are going to use the energy, it has to be low carbon. There has to be a circular economy in use on that time. And this is actually the fact why companies are now thinking about the business models in a different way. It's not about greenwashing, it's about staying alive for the companies. But next one, please. Because this is, so 15 years ago, late 2000, actually it was 2009, 12 years ago, we were in a situation that in Nokia they said that the platform is burning, they need to do something. On that time, 80% of our turnover came from the graphic papers, and then came the all things regarding digitalization, iPads and iPhones and so on. And people started to use those. And it's just a fact of life that we had to think about how we are going to stay alive. The starting point on that time, we created a new strategy called Bio4. Nobody knew what does it mean. There's no word called Bio4. We wanted to make something that separates us from the competition, and so that it's kind of people can remember it. We had 4 topics in that. I'm always starting from the wrong angle, so responsibility was part of the strategy, and it still is. Having a responsible business conduct, thinking about that, for example, corruption, that's self-evident, it's illegal, but you have to have these topics that how your people are behaving. It has to be part of your DNA. Using materials in an efficient manner. 20 years ago, UPM Energy was part of our business models. We have had the energy efficiency program. Since that, we are using less energy by ourselves. We actually can sell the energy nowadays, and it's one of our big and most profitable businesses. Innovations have to be bought when the companies are changing or transforming themselves. Companies are thinking that, okay, what's happening in there? They are part of the society. Climate change is a big topic. Would there be a kind of nice spot how we would do business, and that would somehow solve the big problem that we have? Growth. We were in a situation that 80% of our turnover came from the paper business. We knew that it's going down. We have to do something, and yes, we are doing. At the end of the day, it's all about performance, but it's not only about how much we make money. It's about, do we have accidents for our workforce? What's our CO2 emissions and so on? These have to be aligned, these have to be integrated. And now if we think about UPM, so I said that when the company was established, merged in 1996, we had our first inventory report on that time. When we came out with this Bio4 strategy, on that time we were thinking that how the heck we can do it. Actually, our last corporate responsibility report was published in 2006. Since that we have integrated it, there's annual report for sure, we have to do that as a publicly listed company, but all the relevant topics regarding the responsibility are integrated to that one document. We don't have 200 pages of responsibility, I do agree, but all the material topics are there and they go to everybody who's reading our report. There's no plan B report for us, but all the investors who are not interested, they get the same message. Integration is the key. Next one, please. And now thinking about us, that we are not alone on this planet, and actually what was a big thing and what came also from Lisa, so UN SDGs, that was a big game changer in 2015. So Sustainable Development Goals. More than 190 countries are actually committed to this one, including Finland. The state of Finland is reporting this, but so is the Germany, so is the France, so is every country. But what was interesting on that time was that the United Nations, they recognized that the companies are having so big role that they have to be part of the game. I mentioned that we had 2020 targets already in early 2000. In 2015, we came to conclusion that when UN is launching these new targets, we have to align ours. So what UPM is doing is contributing to these UN targets. We have gone those through, and like Lisa mentioned, it has to be both positives and negatives. There are 169 sub-targets. We have evaluated each and every. We actually were part of the coalition by UN who created the rules how these should be used. Yes, greenwashing, pinkwashing, or rainbow washing, as we heard about these nowadays, if companies are only cherry picking. If you think about UPM, so I mentioned that the energy is big for us. So number 7, yes, 97%, actually even more nowadays, of the energy that UPM energy is generating is CO2 free. We are big of hydropower in Finland, but then if we think about negative impact, for example, migratory fish, that is the thing. So yes, positive energy, CO2 free, negative migratory fish. Both needs to be taken into account. That's the key for all companies. And the next one, please. Now when we come to the values, so I took a study by Etla, so that's one of the economic research institutes in Finland. This was actually published a few weeks ago. So yes, if you think about value, value can be measured, and this is about money. And once again, I actually congratulate the organizers. You have today in this seminar 2 of top 5 Finnish companies creating value for this country. You can see UPM, we are on the 4th. So if you think about what we are doing in Finland, what other taxes we are paying, what are the salaries, we are the number 4. But now if you actually take our supply chains into account, our most northern mill is in Pietarsaari, close to Vaasa. So we are operating, let's say, in the southern and central Finland. We are purchasing a lot of wood from the private forest owners. And here you can see the red bar. If you actually measure UPM's direct and indirect contribution to Finland, we actually are the biggest company in this country. And now if you think about that, the current problems that the societies are having, we are speaking about inequalities. that all the people are concentrating to Helsinki region or London or Berlin, but then at the same time we have to keep the whole country kind of place where you can operate, where you can live and so on. This is how actually we are creating value for the whole Finland. Our supply chain is so wide. But no more about that. You can go and check the Etla study. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting how they are looking for the economic value, and that might be interesting for you as students on this area. Let's take the next one. Now I decided to take one, and I somehow thought that my colleagues would also speak about climate, so I decided to have a UPM approach for climate here as well. I mentioned earlier that we are creating value as a company, or we are creating value with our products. So this is actually visible in here. UPM was part of the Finnish delegation in 2015 when the Paris negotiations were held. We were already on that time having these three angles when we are speaking about climate change. In our case, it's about forests, it's about emissions, and it's about products. Here you can see that we joined a year ago UN Business Ambition for 1.5. The nice figure already came from Lisa. There are something like, I think, 300-400 companies globally who are committed. UPM is one of those. We want to be part of the bigger international coalition. We also joined the Climate Pledge. That's the initiative by Amazon. There actually are two companies in Finland, UPM and Neste. So we are committed to get those results 10 years before Paris Agreement, so 2040. Lisa mentioned it that people are not believing companies, and that's the fact of life. If we now think about these three angles, so forests, yes, land use is a big topic. We saw from Lisa's slide that 37% of the land area actually are forests. It's a very important topic for the climate change, because if you are managing those forests in a sustainable manner, actually they are one of the solutions. But then you can have topics like Amazon when the rainforests are cleared. That's bad for the climate, that's bad for the biodiversity. But you can do it in a good manner. In Finland, for example, we are cooperating with the Natural Resource Institute in Finnish, Luke. We do have a carbon sink figures per year. And last year, UPM's global forest assets, so in Finland, in Uruguay and in US, so our carbon sink was 6.1 million tons. That was positive. And it was kind of science proven. Then we have our emission reduction target. This is by far the most important topic, what companies and what we all should do. We should kind of get rid of our reliance on fossil fuels. We have target to reduce 65% from 2015 by 2030. 5 years have gone, we have reduced 20% or percent point at this moment, we have 45 to go. And those targets are approved by Science Based Target Initiative. They are contributing to this 1.5. And all the figures that we are providing on group level, they are assured by PricewaterhouseCoopers. On site level, they are assured by Kiva Inspecta. And actually on product level, they are also assured. So all this information is available. But then we have the products. That's very interesting case. We have published our carbon footprints, I think, roughly 15 years, but that's the negative. So yes, we all have these negative impacts. If you went morning to the shower, that might be positive that, well, you're not smelling bad. But at the same time, you used warm water. That required energy. The wastewater goes to somewhere, and that needs to be purified. So these negatives and positives have to be checked. And now here we are doing a study together with Syke, that's Finnish Environmental Center, and German IFO, that how we can kind of measure the positive impacts of our products. It's very easy for some, but difficult for others. But let's take the next one. Now we go for the products, and when I mentioned in the beginning that we used to be the biggest paper company in this planet, we still are, rather big, not the biggest, I guess, but these are some of the new openings that we have when we have been transforming UPM. Biofuels, we started our pilot plant in Lappeenranta in Finland 2015, 100,000 tons or roughly 100 million liters. We are not that big compared to Neste, for example, but our starting point was the fact that we have residues, we have a material called tall oil at our pulp mills. Not a single more trees will be used, and our key was that we are away from the wood chain, not heading for the ethanol or the fields and so on. It has to come from our existing supply chain. It has to be a better use for raw material. And now we have one of the best businesses of UPM, biofuels made from residue that we used to have in the past. And now we are considering that we might actually invest 1 billion euro more. The second one, that would be 5 times bigger. Biochemicals is interesting one. We are having an investment ongoing in Germany, a city called Leuna, that's on eastern side of Germany. It's a €500 million. And now if we think about the climate change, so we need to kind of get rid of our reliance on fossil materials, oil, natural gas, coal, and so on. This will be actually the first ever biochemical plant on this planet, a big scale, and we are going to make glycols out of wood. So totally new business for UPM, actually totally new business for everybody, and we don't know how it's going to happen. But this is where we are heading to. Biocomposites, that's interesting one. I mentioned the Raflatac as a big business for us. When you take the label, you have the back paper, the release, you throw that away. So we thought that what the heck we can do with that. The tax, landfill tax in Finland is 80 euros per ton. So actually beforehand, all these label waste were thrown away. It was 80 euros. Now we invented a new composite material. You can go to do-it-yourself shop and you pay 6 euros per meter of that. It's a kind of decking material. Last but not least, where we are heading to, so we have a research center also in Helsinki, in Biomedicum. And nowadays, actually, we are speaking that you can use wood to cure cancer. And that is a totally different level when we are speaking about what kind of value the products can give the society. There actually can be, if I would get a cancer, there's a new material called Grodex made out of wood, and they actually can research that which medicine would work for me. Once again, there's no animal testing, it's wood-based, plant-based, but this is how the companies are nowadays creating value for the society. Let's take the next one. I wanted to have still some examples of financing, that how we are combining this. Roughly a year ago, we kind of hastened the speed of our transformation. We started, for example, this investment in Germany, €500 million. We have another investment in Uruguay, that's $2.5 billion. So we actually had to go back to the loan market. Before that, we were kind of debt-free company. What we did, we took actually a revolving credit facility of €750 million. And just an example of the integrating sustainability. So our margin is now tied with 2 topics. So our CO2 emission reduction target and our positive impacts on biodiversity in Finland. So if we get those 2 happening, the money will be cheaper for us. If we fail, it will be more expensive. And the next one then. And this is now an example that we went forward. So in last autumn, you actually can check this from our website. We launched our Green Finance Framework actually in November. We launched the first green bond then on November as well. That was the biggest ever launch in Finland. Now we actually, I can claim that we got significant savings because there was so big demand for the green bonds. So the money was, well, I can say that it was practically free for us. there's a big demand, and this is an example that how actually companies can benefit by integrating sustainability to their activities. The second green bond came actually a few weeks ago, and last week we actually already published the green bond report that how we use the money. But if you are kind of business professionals, this is one of examples that how really sustainability is nowadays integrated to all activities that companies are doing. And then the next slide. And this is a kind of if you listen to big companies, so they are all doing it, I'm doing it as well. So thinking about the way how responsibility, being a responsible company, having this sustainable solution is visible. Well, for example, this Global Compact, there are 13,000 companies globally participating. They have 40 lead companies, UPM being one. We are the only member from Finland. We are only member from the forest industry. And for example, on CDP, it's the investor rating. So 10 companies globally got 3 A's. We were one of those. But yes, I can boast with these. But the thing is that when we started the transformation story 15 years ago, 12 years ago, on that time, UPM's market value was 4 billion euro and 80% of the turnover came from the paper. Today, actually, our market cap is 17 billion euros, so 4 times bigger. Nowadays, 35% of the turnover comes from this paper business that is shrinking. And now we know that we actually have a huge number of investors. We counted it's 41% of the investors who have invested to UPM, so our owners who actually are committed to being responsible. That's something that you can measure based on the PRI and so on. There are all kinds of things that you can do it. And those guys actually are not selling UPM shares overnight. They are believing us on a long term. And now the next and the last slide of my side. So actually we changed our brand or purpose 2 years ago. We used to be the biggest paper company in the world, and this is now where we are heading to. We are heading to beyond fossils because this is the niche. This is the place where actually we can mitigate the risks, for example, to climate change. And if we do things well, we can create value both for the society, but also for the company. So quite nice to be working in the company that is really trying to have this positive impact. But this was my speech. Unfortunately, we are not in the Pasila, but if you have any questions, so feel free.
Thank you, Sami. That was a very interesting presentation and definitely valuable. And we have some questions to you here already in the chat. So the first one is, what kind of trees are planted to sustain the biodiversity, for example, in Finland or maybe some other countries?
That's an interesting question. In Finland, we are speaking about, we have these semi-natural forests. So in Finland, we only use these species that are naturally growing in Finland. So we have spruce, we have pine, we have birch, we have aspen and so on. And that's one way of doing it. And now if we speak about biodiversity, so then when we have these natural trees, so it's how we actually change our way of operating. For example, in last year, so we came out with a new target that we actually are going to double the amount of broadleaves, so birch and aspen in UPM forests. UPM is in that sense in a pretty good position that we are still owning 500,000 hectares of forests in Finland. We can use all kind of researches and pilots and tests in all our forests. And then actually those can be expanded to the rest of Finnish forests. So in Finland, it's how you manage how much you leave, for example, retention trees, if there's a decaying wood for the insects and so on. Then if we go for Uruguay, that's a totally different ball game in there. There we are speaking about plantations. So in Uruguay, there had never been for example, rainforests in Uruguay, it's a naturally so-called Pampas region. All the natural forests in Uruguay are protected, and when the state of Uruguay decided that they somehow want to widen the economic scale or activities in the country, they decided that some of those grasslands that have been used for hundreds of years for cattle, which are degraded, those actually can be allocated for plantations. And in Uruguay, we are planting eucalyptus. That's a different tree species, not natural in Uruguay, but in there, then the most important biodiversity topic is decided when we're establishing the plantation. So if there's any value on the, or let's say biodiversity value on that area, so plantation is not established. In Uruguay, we have 260,000 hectares of land area. Roughly 60% of that is planted for eucalyptus, and the rest, that's for the protection, that's for the cattle herding, that's for the beehives and so on. But it depends where you're operating.
Okay, interesting. Thank you, Sami, for your answer. And we have some more questions from Anthony. As paper and wood-based production is heavily water intensive, what are UPM doing to minimize the usage of fresh water?
Good question again. And now thinking about that, we have a very long history. So for example, this Kymi mill was established in 1872. So the engineers on that time, they thought that, okay, where do you have water available? Where do you have trees available? So the starting point is the same than with the biodiversity protection in Uruguay. You actually need to establish those operations to area where you have water. And Finland is a good example. We do have plenty of water. But of course, that is not the whole thing. So then you go for the efficiency. Like I said, that if somebody of you took the shower earlier today, so the water first, it was purified first, that requires energy, then it was pumped, then it was heated, and all of that is energy related. If you think about companies trying to be successful, they try to be as kind of resource efficient as possible. So like I said, we started our energy efficiency activities in late 1990s. We are going through all our mills every year, and we are improving every year. Using less water is not good only for environment, it's actually good for the business and results at the same time. So usually it's the normal that average we are circulating water, 95% of the water is circulated. We are using the clean water for one purpose, then when it goes dirty, we use it for another purpose. When it goes even more dirty, it might go the lowest quality place where we need water, and then at the end of the day we are purifying it, and then we are returning it back to the nature where we are using it. So we don't take the water away. But very good question, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sami, for your answer. And one more question, I think, before we will end the presentation. This one, what is UPM's take on clear cutting? Does it happen?
Yes. If you think about clear cuttings and if you think about the practices, so after the war, when Finland was paying kind of some kind of well, we were paying Russia because we lost the war, and on that time, for example, we are still speaking about Osaran aukiot or clear cuttings in northern Finland. It was something like 7,000 hectares or even more, huge areas. Nowadays, the clear cuttings are still used, but the average size of the clear cutting in Finland is something like 1 hectare, 1.5 hectare, so less than actually football field. And nowadays, the clear cutting actually is not clear cutting in that sense that we are all using these forest certification schemes, so both FSC and PEFC, and that is one of the things that we have learned, that you actually, here you can't be too efficient. So always when the companies are doing clear cuttings, even small case, they are always leaving these retention trees. So trees are left there, the big ones, they actually are going to die later on, they are going to fall down, they are going to decay, and that's done for the environmental purposes. And nowadays there's a good discussion, there's required discussion in Finland that what kind of harvesting systems we should use, whether it's clear cutting, when it's, or should it be some kind of continuous cover forestry, and all of those are tested. So something that was okay 50 years ago is not okay today, and something that is okay today may not be okay anymore in 20 or 30 years. But we shall see. We are following the discussion.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Sami, for answering the questions and for you being with us here today. It was a great pleasure. Thank you, Sami.
Thanks from my side as well, and have a nice webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. And now it is 11:30, so it is time to go for a coffee break. Let's get back, please, after 15 minutes. So let's say we meet at 11:45. Thank you. See you at 11:45. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you could have some coffee and drinks and a little snack. Now, let me present our next speaker. It is Salla Ahonen, Vice President, Sustainability from Neste Corporation. Hello, Salla.
Hi.
Yes, we can hear you. Very good.
Woohoo.
Hello. Hello, Salla.
Hi. Yep, I'm here.
Yes.
Super
Okay.
excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Now I'm hoping that you can also find my slides. You know, we had some technical hiccups in getting me here, so let's hope that all goes smoothly from now on.
It will. Yes. We had our previous presenters. It was all went fine. No worries. Thank you for coming.
If you can get my slides up and running.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Maybe moving on straight away to the next slide. So those of you who don't know Neste, the Finns might think of Neste as the oil company, but it's actually really important to understand that we've gone through quite a transformation already. The transformation continues, of course, but you know, now 94% of Neste's profits come from renewable businesses. And the most familiar for most people would be the renewable road transportation, so renewable diesel for cars, but then also now an increasingly renewable aviation and the renewable polymers and chemicals. So this is very much a part of how companies need to keep reinventing themselves to stay relevant also in the future and understanding what are the solutions that are needed going forward. So if you take the next slide. So this is the transformation that I already mentioned. So the company was founded in 1948 with the purpose of securing Finland's oil supply. And if you think about that, I mean, I'm sure it was a very relevant purpose for a company at the time. And then that lasted for a good number of years, and that was seen to be enough. But Neste is also a very interesting company. Already a long time ago, there was a lot of focus on research and innovation. So actually nowadays, about 25% of the staff is working with research, innovation, and engineering. And if you think about an oil company, this is probably not the first thing that you would think about. So already in 1996, a group of people in the research unit, a group of very intelligent women, I might add, actually had come up with a new idea of making renewable diesel. So making the same product, but out of renewable resources. And at the time, the company was not really interested in that innovation and thinking that, you know, this would be cannibalizing the business, etc. But they filed a patent and then they put it aside. But then the world has changed a lot. And already in the early 2000s, the discussion was a lot about climate. And I've been with Neste for 2 years, so I can't give you an accurate eyewitnesses description on what was happening, but I'm assuming that was the time when also the company focusing on oil started thinking about, are we going to be relevant also in the future? And then they started looking at what it is that they could do differently. And they actually then looked at what was going on and what had been going on in the innovation unit as well. And they made a really, really bold decision around 2006 that they would start investing into this renewable diesel. And that was a time when, yes, there was a lot of discussion on climate. Those of you who may have heard, I don't think anybody here is as old as me, that would actually remember there was the big climate meeting in Copenhagen, and people were expecting big things to happen. And that was the time when also Neste decided to start investing. And while there was a debate going on climate, there was no legislation, there was no customer demand. So it was really something that, you know, we make this massive investment and start making these refineries that will start producing this product for which there wasn't even a market. And the decision was made. for a number of years, it was like a nice hobby at the side of the business, so not really bringing in a lot of money or any in the beginning, and there was a lot of work to be done to actually also change the business environment, providing market access, providing enough support for this kind of solution, and also educating customers that this was a possibility. And like I said in the previous slide, this has now taken a big step forward, and now 94% of the profits of the company is coming from this renewable side of the business. And this has been a really exciting transformation already, but it's not at the end of the transformation. Obviously, first it was the road diesel, so something to be used in the cars. I mentioned now we're also growing the aviation business, so that if you think about the sectors that are in need of new, more climate-friendly solutions, aviation comes to mind quite quickly. So now having this sustainable aviation fuel available that is made of waste and residues, then that also gives another possibility of reducing the impact of travel. And then we've also looked at what it is that we can do with our own activities. So we've realized that we have a big carbon footprint, and last year we announced that we're going to aim for carbon neutral production by 2035. And if you think about that, this is still a company that is still in oil refining, that's a very bold goal. And at the same time, we're also promising that we will help our customers reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 20 million tons annually by 2030. So we're also hoping that we will be able to work together with others to work towards climate goals. And then that's not all. We're also looking at, well, before joining Neste, I was actually working in Brussels. And at the time, it was just before the IPCC report came out, which sort of turned the tide on climate discussions. I mean, sustainability is an area where topics come and go. Climate has been going really high up on the discussion and going down again. But now, before the most recent climate discussions really heightened, the big discussion was on plastics. And then I got quite curious when I heard that Neste is also working on trying to be part of solving the plastics problem. So providing chemical recycling for those types of plastics that cannot be recycled mechanically. So we have made a goal on that as well. And now the discussions are more back into climate, but it seems that the plastic discussion is there also under radar, so still going fairly strong. But this time I think, and now we can actually move on to the next slide, I think that the discussion has already changed a little bit on the climate issue, so that it's there to stay now. First, though, when I said that we were founded in 1948 with the purpose of securing Finland's oil supply, nowadays the purpose of the company is creating a healthier planet for our children. So I think this shows quite a lot that there has been a massive transformation in the company already. And this is actually something that I think every single employee can recite in their sleeve. So what is the purpose of the company? This is what brings people to the company. I was actually not entirely convinced when approached by Neste for this role. I knew then that the company was going through a transformation, and I knew that there was a new CEO as well. And so when being interviewed for the job, I also asked the new CEO, who's not Finnish, he's Belgian German. So what brought him to Neste? So why would he join? And then he said that because of the purpose of the company. And that for me was actually the turning point where I knew that I actually also wanted to work for this company. If this is what the CEO firmly believes in, then I can believe that this is something that the company is taking seriously. So if we move on to the next slide. So I said that the transformation is something that is ongoing, but I think Sami already mentioned that a lot of companies have all these really nice I don't know, what would you call it, awards by different associations that fourth most sustainable company, or on the leadership level or in CDP, or included in Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And these are all really nice. But for me, one of the most exciting recommendations or rewards, or whatever you want to call it, is this one by the Harvard Business Review, that they have listed Neste as one of the top 20 business transformation of the last decade. And I think this shows truly that there's been a massive change in what the company is all about. And it's also really, really important to understand that this type of transformation doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you need to understand who are the partners that you need to work with to start on this journey. And now if you jump on to the next one. So we've already discussed a little bit today about trust, basically. So that you know, people don't really believe in what companies say. And this has been the case for as long as I remember. When I started working on sustainability issues more than 20 years ago, and I remember there was a study at that time as well. So what do people find as reliable sources of information? And there were all kinds of things. And at the very bottom of the list were, you know, information given by companies. And even above that were, you know, women's magazines. And well, it felt a little bit like, you know, what can we do to make people believe? But I think there is a good reason to really be careful in what you're being told. But then again, also companies probably have a key role in starting to build this trust, but there needs to be a really open collaboration with many different stakeholders, and not just working with your own customers or your own suppliers, but really hearing out what NGOs have to say, really working together with policymakers, for example. Really, it's about creating an innovation ecosystem that takes into account the different actors that need to be part of this change, and so that you can actually trust what the others are trying to aim for. And only like that you can start building a more sustainable future as well. If you take the next one. So Sustainable Development Goals is a very, very useful framework, because also when talking about sustainability, I already said that, you know, sustainability topics come and go. And then also there are very different definitions on what do we talk about when we talk about sustainability. So the SDGs is a very useful framework, and it's also one of those things that has become even maybe more alive than some people expected. So they were first introduced a few years ago, but now they seem to be everywhere. They are part of when the European Commission is showing that these are the focus areas for the Commission or for the next Horizon program. They are reflecting the Sustainable Development Goals. When you're talking to your customers, it's quite often that they say that, you know, these SDGs are our SDGs and what are you working on? So it can also be a helpful way of identifying if we have the same big questions in mind. For us, I mean, obviously all 17 are important. For us, we wanted to also have a deep dive into seeing where we actually have the biggest impact. And these are the ones that are seen to be the most relevant for Neste. My personal favorite is number 17, the partnerships for the goals, because I think it's so important that we understand that, you know, when we are in the business of changing the world, basically, then we need to understand that we need to find the right partners to work with. And then if you take the next one. So today I thought, you know, mostly maybe focusing on climate, because this is the one that is the main driver of our main business. So basically fighting climate change is something that we all need to take super seriously. It is not something that we can, you know, ignore, but it's also something where we think that this innovation that was made in the 1990s is now more relevant than ever, because there's more and more demand for the types of solutions that actually can help in this undertaking. If you take the next one. And this has become really clear also when talking to investors. So when we were working on our own climate strategy, and we had to really look at, this means a big change for how the company operates. It's a big change for the strategy. It means massive financial contributions, and we need to, be able to justify why we want to make this change. And then it was really quite helpful that at the same time as I was preparing to go to our executive committee and our board, we started getting these messages also that investors were really changing how they look at companies. So more than a year ago now, there was this famous letter from BlackRock, the biggest investor in the world, basically, who were saying that they are pulling out of companies that are not taking climate seriously. So when you start realizing that the money is actually now following sustainability, or rather, if you're not sustainable, the money doesn't follow you, then this is where you can actually start changing how companies operate. And this is the massive change that I've seen in the past couple of years. It's no longer about companies saying that we want to be more sustainable. It's no longer only about, making climate claims, but it's really about turning this into money and into business. And this is a change that I've not witnessed before. So if you take the next one. So this is the more on our own carbon footprint promise. So when looking at a change that big, that when we announced this a year ago, we saw that, okay, so we have 15 years, and it sort of sounds like, that's forever. And we needed to understand what it is that we need to start doing now. What can we do next? How do we make sure that we make all these changes so that we have this carbon neutral production by 2035? It's very important to understand that this is not a sustainability team exercise. This is something where we have involved the whole company. So we have people from production line, from innovation, from strategy, from HR, everywhere. When planning this strategy, we actually had a number of workshops, and we were asking people, so what could we do if we wanted to turn our production carbon neutral? And my absolutely favorite part was when somebody asked, are we allowed to dream? And I said, yes, this is the time when we do dream and come up with every single idea. And then we start only bringing in the financials and is it practical and when can we do it? So we got more than 100 ideas. And then we took out the overlapping ones or the ones that were not otherwise relevant. And currently we have around 80 different initiatives that we are now putting on the timescale. But some of the really important things were that the ideas were not necessarily always new. And we were then wondering, so why haven't we done these already? So for example, some of the energy efficiency improvements. And we realized that it was because the investment criteria that the company was using were not supporting these types of activities. So one of the first things that we did, we actually changed the investment criteria for the company. So now whenever the investment committee is thinking about whether or not to proceed with some sort of project, they need to also show the impact on greenhouse gas emissions. And we've also changed the way we include carbon in our calculations. So we introduced an internal price on carbon to make sure that we prioritize the type of initiatives that are actually helping us meet our climate commitments. We've also identified some of those issues that are sort of easier to already implement, such as aiming for 100% renewable electricity. So we have started working on that. And then we've identified some technologies or some cases where they're not yet quite ready, but we don't want to wait, for the next 14 years and then just, think that we will by magic turn the key and then, we are carbon neutral. But we are now also piloting some of these new technologies so that we are getting more information or we are making them more financially interesting for the future. We are adding all these different energy efficiency improvements. Some of them can be done basically on the run. And for others, we need to have big changes in, for example, how the production runs. So that's when we tie them in with these big turnaround projects in the refineries anyways. And we still need to be monitoring all of these things. So we are actually monitoring this on a monthly basis. We report back to the executive committee and to the board. We've made sure that this is also part of our leadership incentives. So our management, our key personnel, their rewards are tied to our climate commitment. So this is firmly part of the strategy. It's not an add-on. So it's very, very important that when you want to have a meaningful change, you make it part of the way you operate. But then also we need to make sure that we're now 14 years away from the deadline. We need to make sure that everybody stays committed on these things. Everybody understands what it is in their role that they need to do. But also looking beyond our own activities, we need to understand how can we make sure that the business environment is ready for this type of action. So we need to talk to the policymakers and say that, we're making all these investments, but, how can they also make sure that it's interesting for those companies that are making the change to actually do it? We need to follow what our actions are and how well we are aligned with, for example, Paris Agreement. And then finally, we're talking about carbon neutral production, but we know that we won't be able to get to zero. So we need to understand that what do we do with the rest of the emissions and then have a really credible way for compensating them. Now, if we turn to the next one. So already with this, our carbon footprint promise, we also need to understand that we don't know everything. We have a lot of very intelligent people, but there is a world beyond Neste. And we actually do a lot of research and development cooperation with around 20-25 different universities, both in Finland as well as internationally, because there's a lot of good research going on there that we can learn from. We are also identifying smaller companies that have knowledge on technologies that we need. So we have invested in, for example, this company Sunfire to bring in these new understandings and to be able to pilot some of these new ideas. And then we need to understand, like I showed you the timeline. So we need to understand where do we need to do more research and do it now so that we can actually implement it in 15 years' time. Where do we need to start piloting now so that we can scale it up in 2035? And where can we already scale up? And now we've also identified some partners that can help us, for example, in finding this renewable electricity. It's easy to say that we will go for 100% renewable electricity, but you actually also need to make sure that it's available. So we've made some, for example, power purchase agreements to make sure that this is a possibility for us. And now if you take the next slide. So I also mentioned that we had two climate commitments. So one was the carbon footprint and the other one is the carbon handprint. And for those of you who are not familiar with the terminology, so carbon handprint means it's the difference that the customers are making in lowering their carbon footprint by using our solutions. So the difference is then that handprint. And what I've been using internally as well, that we have two climate commitments. One is on the carbon handprint, and it means that we need to get the carbon handprint up, and then we have the one on carbon footprint, and we need to get the carbon footprint down. So if you take the next one. Oh, we've lost the background. Well, it doesn't really matter. So we said that we are aiming at helping our customers reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 20 million tons by 2030. So last year we were at 10 million tons, so halfway there, and that's the same approximately as removing 3.7 million passenger cars from the roads for a year. So this is already good, but clearly there needs to be more solutions so that we can actually aim for carbon neutral economies. If you take the next one. So also here we've been looking at different types of partnerships and how can we innovate new kinds of solutions. So and you need to look a bit wider. So who should we be working with, and what is the problem that different stakeholders have, and how can we help solve that? So for example, with the city of Oakland, we have this agreement where we collect the waste cooking oils from the different restaurants in Oakland, and then that is turned into renewable diesel that the city is then using in their fleet. So I think it's really nice that they really are managing to turn their waste into a product that is useful for their everyday life. Then we have a similar thing that we've been doing with McDonald's in the Netherlands. So taking the used cooking oil from the fries, turning that into diesel, which is then used in their logistics. And then when we were doing the carbon footprint commitment and our overall climate strategy, we were actually looking beyond our production and looking at what it is that we are doing more as a company, and also looking at some of these ideas that we had. We noticed that it kind of would make sense that if we would be using our own aviation fuel for our business travel, and while it's a minor part of our emissions, we felt that it was an important step to take, and also to show our own employees that we are taking action and using the product. So this is what we decided on. And we actually came out with our climate commitments the day that the world closed down for the pandemic. So it was a bit of a bad timing for us, maybe. We also announced this collaboration with Finnair, in March last year. So we haven't been flying that much since. But we yesterday actually announced that we have now made the sustainable aviation fuel available at the Helsinki airport so that Finnair can start using it. So when we start traveling again, we can actually at least make sure that we are doing that in a sustainable manner. Now maybe if you can give me the next slide. So this is trying to show that, from ideas to large-scale implementation, it can take a while, and it can take a number of different partners. So for example, with the sustainable aviation fuel, we started piloting it already in 2011. So looking at different airlines, so we were piloting it with Lufthansa, and then a few years later thinking how can we make it available, working with other airlines, but also realizing that we need to make it available at airports. So bringing in, for example, Oslo in Norway. And then looking at, okay, we have this product, we have some customers, but how can we scale up? So we needed to also find partners who have the infrastructure. So instead of starting to build your own infra to deliver the fuel, we partnered up with Air BP, who have that infrastructure available. Then also looking at, okay, we've done all this in Europe, then expanding to other markets. So looking at the US and also looking at Japan. So also moving on to different airlines in America, looking at San Francisco Airport, for example, also working together with the Japanese airline. And then also moving beyond to other distributing partners. So going from piloting to scaling up and finding always the right partner is something that you need if you really want to have a long-term sustainable solution. If you take the next one. Oh, something wrong with my slide again, but this is supposed to show that, we can see ourselves in one of these 4 boxes, basically. So if we continue with business as usual, are we affecting people or planet negatively or positively? And how big is that change? And it's really important to understand that if we are really trying to change and trying to make sure that we have a livable planet also going forward, we need to somehow be in the breakthrough corner. And how can we then get there? We need to be really thinking about what do we have that we can do differently? Do we have enough innovation to find these new solutions? If we have those solutions, do we know how to scale them up so that we can actually make the positive change exponential. And this is something that is really important, that we're not just taking some nice little things and thinking that that's going to be enough. We need to be able to really think big and act big and find those partners that can help us scale these up. And if you take the next one. So this is basically summing up what I already said, that looking at the solutions that we have and how to scale them up is absolutely critical. Also looking at how can we make sure that we're not standing still. We need to keep innovating. We need to understand, this presentation has been mostly about climate. We need more solutions for climate issues, but there are other issues also where we need to understand how can we turn our activities into more sustainable ones. Where do we get the ideas? Where do we get the knowledge? So understanding also who should we work together with in terms of research or other parts of our value chain, and really making it beneficial for everybody. So not just looking at short-term interest for one company, but finding these partnerships where we can together scale up our sustainable behavior is something that I believe would be the only way forward. Also, if you're thinking about maybe the best known, already a little bit old definition of sustainability, looking at people, planet and profit. And then I think I'll end here. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
Yes. Thank you, Salla, for your valuable presentation. It was very interesting. So yes, and we have some questions. The one from Jennifer. Why did Neste choose the Netherlands, Singapore and Bahrain as your international operations?
A very good question. There is always a lot of different aspects that you need to consider. Reminding still that we have refineries also in Finland. Then looking at the first renewable refineries, they were actually put in Porvoo, in Rotterdam and in Singapore. And this is how we were trying to make sure that we have them close to different types of raw materials, but also in locations where it makes sense to take the product to the markets as well. So it's a combination of different topics. Now I can't hear you if you're saying something.
Yes, thank you very much for the answer. And then there are more questions, and let's see how many of them we'll have time to answer. Yes. For example, what kind of measures does Neste take to prevent toxics in the environment?
Well, a wide question again. So
yes,
we have a dedicated team looking at health, safety, environment that is really active in our production sites and looking at our own operations. And then we go beyond that. So we have a very robust team looking at supply chain sustainability. That's actually the biggest part of the sustainability team at Neste. And we have, people in all those locations where we source raw materials, and we have a very wide list of criteria for all our suppliers. So they need to meet with our sustainability criteria. We audit their behavior. Our own behavior is audited. So this is a very core part of what we do. I often say that what we sell is sustainability. So we actually need to make sure that our own activities are also up to a high standard. I think that may have been a bit of a vague answer, but otherwise that would take 5 hours maybe.
Yes, Salla. So one question is here a little bit personal. How did you become a vice president of sustainability? Seems our audience are interested more about your background.
I have a very strange background. So I actually studied energy engineering and environmental protection in an area where people didn't understand what these two things had to do with each other. So I remember when studying, people would say that why, and I couldn't understand the question then. Also, then looking for my first job, I don't know how many different companies were telling me that, oh yeah, well, sustainability, that's something for the future, and it seemed to take forever for the future to get there. However, straight out of university, I went to work with Nokia, and that was super exciting. I got to be part of the team that actually defined sustainability for that sector that was then growing. I spent 17 years with Nokia and Microsoft looking at different sustainability topics, but also with public affairs. So looking at, and this is a passion of mine, I strongly believe in the role that companies take in society. And I was doing sustainability lobbying at a time when that didn't really exist, and where lobbying was seen to be done by companies who wanted to slow down progress. Whereas I was always more into speeding up progress. And I don't know, then I went to work for this Confederation of Finnish Industries, representing all different Finnish industries in how we deal with digitalization or sustainability or circular economy or climate and all of these issues. And then I got a call asking if I'd be interested in talking to Neste, and like I sort of referred to in the beginning, I said no, because I felt that, I'm a sustainability professional, I don't want to work for an oil company, but then started looking more into what Neste had become, and the rest is history.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. Salla, we will have one more question, okay? Maybe last question, and the rest can be answered already here in the chat if you will have time then by you or by our moderators. So does Neste also drill crude oil or only refines crude oil?
We have no oil drilling or exploration, it's only refining.
Oh, it's only refining.
Yeah.
Okay, then thank you, Salla, for answering the questions and your interesting presentation. It was precious time with you.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Yes, thank you so much. Goodbye. So now we're finalizing the webinar, and if we would be here present physically, everybody, we would hear the big applause for our presenters. Thank you very much, everybody, for presentations today. And now comes the possibility to win prizes. You can participate in our lottery. So how to do that? You just leave your feedback after our today's webinar, following the link which you can find in the chat, or you can use this QR code which you see now on your screen, and it will be there for the next hour. Then how it will be chosen. We have a random system which will pick some of your feedbacks, and the prizes will be sent to you even you are in a different country, meaning that you are not in Finland. And we will definitely appreciate all of your feedbacks. As students of Business College Helsinki have been working really hard and have learned a lot of new things, so this webinar could happen for us here today. Once again, please leave your feedback through the link or by scanning the QR code on your screen. And now I would like to thank you all for being here with us today and to become a part of an absolutely necessary knowledge for the humanity, sustainability of business and economy. That's the way we share, we learn, we transform, and going to the better future. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
and then we have something new. Thinking about UPM, we have 50.
Like, that's forever. And
So does Neste also drill crude oil or only refines crude oil?
we have no oil drilling or exploration, it's only refining.
Oh, it's only refining.
Yeah.
Okay. Then thank you, Sala, for answering the questions. And
that people choose notice that a lot of
Here you can see also